A good rule of thumb is to always get it in writing, and that's certainly true when it comes to investing. Out of all the investments out there, not all are contractual. For investors over the age of 50, knowing which are and which aren't is absolutely crucial. It's that time again, time to tune out the hype and focus on the facts. Facts that matter to you, the income generation. Let's get started. Get ready to separate reality from myth.
Joining me right now is Sound Income Strategies founder and CEO David Scranton.
They've created a new type of inflation, and although markets have always been an emotional place, they seem to be even more of an emotional place these days.
Jeffrey Small, market watcher, is with me.
Stock market dynamic is getting ready to significantly change.
So let's bring in our co-host, Jeff Small, president of Arbor Financial Services, and also the brand ambassador for the Retirement Income Store. In my book entitled The Retirement Income Story, I instruct readers to mark page 125 and to highlight the next few pages that follow. Why? Because it's a section of the book where I discuss the difference between individual bonds and bond mutual funds. The crux of that difference is that one is a contract-based investment and the other one is not. Therefore, one comes with two important assurances, assuming, of course, no defaults, and the other comes with no assurances. On today's show, we'll take a deeper dive into why that distinction is so incredibly important. And we'll also explain the importance of contractual investing to our very own income model. We'll also talk about other specific types of contractual investments and how, with the help of the right advisor, they can help protect your portfolio while still giving you the potential for growth. Joining me and my co-host, of course, Jeff Small, will be our good friend, Robert Kiyosaki, author and founder of Rich Global LLC and the Rich Dad Company. We'll also talk to Jim Lineweaver, the founder and CEO of Lineweaver Financial Group in Northeastern Ohio. Jim's the author of a new book coming out later this month, and we're going to talk about his book with him. But first, let's talk more about the classic examples of two different approaches to the same investment tool. One contract-based and the other not. And this is, of course, the individual bonds versus bond mutual funds discussion. You see, when the average investor looking for more conservative options hears the term bond mutual fund, oftentimes it checks off two boxes in his or her head. First, he or she may know that bonds are considered more conservative than stocks. And second, that person probably likes mutual funds. Unfortunately, what the investor typically doesn't know is that a bond mutual fund not only lacks the two contractual guarantees that come with individual bonds, but it also contains all the risks of a stock mutual fund. In fact, the textbook definition of a bond fund is actually this: the stock of a company that owns bonds. More specifically, a bond fund is simply a mutual fund that pools money into bonds instead of into stocks. If an advisor tries to tell you it's a, quote, more conservative option, what they're most likely trying to say is it represents the more conservative end of their aggressive business model. The real more conservative option is an actively managed portfolio of individual bonds. Why? Because it's a contractual investment. And within that contract are two important assurances that you do not get with a bond mutual fund. The first, a guaranteed dollar amount of interest paid for the life of the bond. And number two, a repayment of the face value when the bond matures, provided, of course, there's no default. The difference between investing for individual bonds and bond mutual funds can be one of the most important distinctions that investors over the age of 50 should understand. Now, while mutual funds can be a useful investment tool during the growth and accumulation stage of retirement, or retirement planning, I should say, they become problematic once you start transitioning into the retirement income stage. Again, because in many ways, they're a growth-based strategy that can leave you vulnerable to volatility and to the risk of spend down. With bond mutual funds, it's because they take an investment tool that normally does have a contract, but they package it in a way that essentially eliminates the contract. While bond funds do technically qualify as an income-based investment tool, they're typically not used by advisors who specialize in more conservative income-based strategies. Why? Because they're less strategic and they're riskier than the true, more conservative approach. An actively managed portfolio of individual bonds. So why do many advisors offer only bond mutual funds and promote them as more conservative options? We'll be talking about that coming up in just a bit. Now it's time to bring in our guest and our good friend, Robert Kiyosaki, founder of Rich Global LLC and the Rich Dad Company. He's also best-selling personal finance author and co-author of the book, Who Stole My Pension? How You Can Stop the Looting. Robert, thanks so much for being back on the show with us here today.
David, I appreciate it. Like we're talking about, this tree is gone now because of that fire in California. It's a very sad time, you know.
Yeah,
my friend vineyard.
It is. It's a time, you know. Every year it seems like you folks have to deal with that, but this year has been particularly bad, and I guess it's particularly bad for lots of things. You know, I just bought a Life is Good T-shirt just last week with a big golf ball on the front of it. And it says 2020, one big mulligan, right? And I think a lot of people feel that way. In fact, recently you said in a tweet, you said, hold cash, be patient, the worst is yet to come. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, there's no correlation now between the price and the fundamentals. And it's not the fundamentals of the market, it's the fundamentals of the economy. And you said it, you know, it's this book here, Who Stole My Pension? You know, when they started to flatten the yield curve back in 2005, it meant pensions got wiped out because they couldn't maintain that 7% annual growth. So today, the pension plans are toast. So the biggest crash is yet to come, and it's pensions for police, firefighters, and school teachers. And I don't see any way out of it. You know, as you know, in the market today, how do you generate income? That's the biggest question of all.
So you were talking about, and of course, you know, our viewers know they watch us every Sunday morning because they want to learn how to generate income. That's what we're always talking about. So when you were talking about the worst is yet to come, I get the fact that a lot of the pensions are underfunded, and that's going to create potentially a significant problem for a lot of Americans. But moreover, I thought specifically you were talking about the stock market at this particular point for people who are investing in 401ks. Was that what you were discussing with that tweet or implying with that tweet?
No, I'm just thinking about, you know, macro. I mean, the whole world is in serious trouble because back in 71, when Nixon started printing money, you know, it blew this world into this massive bubble. Then 2008, they continued the bubble blowing. And now this bubble is so big, then you have COVID added to it. And you go, how much more bubble can you blow? That's the whole thing. And I don't think we've seen the worst yet. So that's my concern. And, you know, and Buffett, he started selling bank shares, but, you know, the banks stopped paying dividends. So there's something going on. Plus airlines, you know, I look at all that and say, can you give me a solution to the fundamentals of the economy? And I don't see it. That's why I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, the stock market is obviously really counting on a good economic recovery. If you look at just today, there's definitely a difference between the two. And the stock market's forward-looking 6, maybe 12 months. So, of course, the stock market investors today are really hoping that 6 or 12 months, things are going to turn around. And they may or they may not. But as far as the long-term bubble, you know, the debt bubble that you referred to, that's always the tough call is, how long is it going to last? The bubble can go for 5 or 10 more years. Yep. Eventually, something has to give. But the question is, what do you do between now and then when interest rates are this low? And that's why we talk about investing by contract here on the show today. I know you're a fan, you're a real estate guy, and part of the reason you love real estate is because, you know, you love having leases with creditworthy tenants and knowing what you're going to be able to get. We have 30 seconds left in the segment, but isn't that the basic gist of part of why you love real estate so much?
Well, real estate's technically a bond, and real estate depends upon jobs. You know, so there's a counterparty risk as they talk about. So if they don't have jobs, they don't pay the rent, and the forbearance right now is so high, people are not paying. And then the CDC stepped in, those commie little bastards. They told everybody, you don't have to pay your rent. Well, what's the CDC stepping into my business? So
I've talked to so many people who own property who are just devastated by that. It's not good. We need to take a quick commercial break. Robert, stay with us, please. And you stay with us too. We have much more coming up right here on The Income Generation. We'll be right back. I'm David Scranton. During my career, I found that most baby boomers have done a great job growing their retirement savings, yet many don't know how to convert their savings into steady income. And that is why I built the Retirement Income Store, to help hardworking Americans preserve their assets and establish steady streams of income.
Call 866-710-1749 to receive your free retirement income kit with 5 educational tools and a no-obligation conversation with an income specialist. Call 866-710-1749. Online at theretirementinComeStore.com.
The Income Generation is now available on YouTube. Subscribe to The Income Generation so you never miss a show. You can watch all your favorite episodes now in one place, as well as catch up with your favorite financial guests. Subscribe now to The Income Generation, only on YouTube.
So why is it that most advisors misleadingly offer only bond mutual funds as their more conservative income-based option rather than individual bonds? Well, one reason I believe is convenience. Once the advisor puts you in a bond mutual fund, it's then up to that fund's manager to do most of the heavy lifting. The advisor doesn't need to possess or even have access to the special knowledge and resources it takes to actively manage a portfolio of individual bonds. Another reason is financial resources. Bond funds are potentially a more lucrative option for the advisor who's not an income specialist. Let's say, for example, you go to an advisor who's commission-based and tell him you want to invest $100,000 in individual bonds. What he knows, but you may not, is that bonds are typically a one-and-done type of investment. If you buy a 10-year bond and hold it to maturity, the advisor or broker who sells it can only charge you once during the life of that bond. Since the investment is not usually traded, he can't charge a very high commission on a sale. So while you might think $100,000 is a lot of money on the sales side, on the commission side, it's typically going to translate to only about 0.5% or maybe $500 one time during that 10-year period. And that's not much. But on the other hand, he still wants to be able to invest your $100,000 and have it under his management. So rather than sell you one individual bond or a basket of them, odds are he's going to put you in a bond mutual fund. The commission on a bond or stock mutual fund is often 5%, just as it is on a variable annuity. So now you're talking about $5,000 on a $100,000 sale, which is obviously much better than $500. Plus, once your money is under his management, the advisor can potentially make more off it by moving things over time and reallocating. And in part, this is because your bond fund isn't a contractual investment. So he knows that he's got the freedom down the road, more freedom actually, to possibly reallocate you into riskier growth-based strategies that make more money in many ways for his firm. Now, in reality, many advisors today are moving toward a fee-based business model. And oftentimes, in order to justify their fees, they steer clients toward riskier portfolios that require more active management. Riskier typically means at least 60% stock-based investments. Now, while it's true that some stock-based strategies can work well for certain income-focused investors with the right risk tolerance, it's important to remember this. Most bond funds do not provide the same level of contractual protection and guaranteed income as individual bonds, assuming no defaults. And the other tools that make up a truly more conservative income-based portfolio are things that we'll be talking about coming up in just a bit. Right now, it's time to bring back our good friend, Robert Kiyosaki, author and businessman. Robert, thanks for sticking around. We were talking right before the break about rental property. I didn't give you much time. And you're right. Part of the things about rental property, and the same is true for people who invest, let's say, in real estate investment trusts. The idea is, you have a lease, and that lease is supposed to assure you a certain amount of income, so it works like a bond. And over time, hopefully, you can renew the lease and put inflation hedge. A lot of commercial properties have that cost of living thing built in. But all that goes out the window if the government's telling tenants that they don't have to pay, and they're telling owners that they can't evict. Isn't that true?
That's correct. And those REITs, a lot of it's in retail. In shopping centers and office buildings. And I was just really sad. I was at one of the biggest shopping malls in Phoenix, and it was a ghost town. I mean, not that there's no people there, there's no tenants there. They've moved out. And that's the whole thing is there's a CMBS, is collateralized mortgage-backed securities. That's collapsing. So that's why I was pretty pessimistic going, I don't like cash, but cash is going to be king probably for the next let's say a year or so. Because the good news is there's going to be bargains floating to the surface, but you don't want to be the skipper of the Titanic going down with the ship, and you better have some cash, which is like the life preserver, so you can start investing again. So it's not all bad news, but just being aware of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. And, we always talk about bonds and bond-like instruments. And, if you can get even 4% these days in interest and dividends, with a subdued inflation rate, 4% isn't that bad, but you've got to be really careful. Just like the federal government, as you indicated, had saddled us with a lot of extra debt as a country, a bubble that at some point, probably will burst, whether it's in our lifetimes or not, we don't know. But so you got to be careful even with corporations to make sure that you're not buying bonds or preferreds in zombie companies, essentially, correct?
Correct. It's always the fundamentals at this point. And that's why I said there's a separation between the price and the fundamentals, not only of stocks or real estate, but generally the US government as a whole. They've separated. It makes no sense anymore. And this COVID-19 thing has accelerated and made it 10 times worse. And is there a solution? I don't see one. I don't think, last night Trump was claiming he had a vaccine. Well, that's good, but vaccines don't wash away the debt.
Right. Very true. And vaccines are typically only about 40 or 50% effective anyway. So is that really going to give people the confidence to just go back to the old ways? I think perhaps not. But, you're the guy who wrote the book, Cash Flow Quadrant, right? So you're the cash flow guy. So how do you tell people today to get cash flow if they're investors, especially whether retired or not? Where do you tell them to go?
This is going to sound strange, but you have to watch out for socialism today. And I don't mean in a bad way. This Green New Deal, the biggest investments are not going to be in technology or gold and silver. The biggest technology is going to be in energy. And so this Green New Deal, AOC and all those communists out there, like Sanders, they're going to force people to become more energy efficient. And so even, I think it's BP or one of those companies just said, we're no longer an oil company, we're an energy company. So that's going to force them into alternative energy, such as solar, wind, and all that, which is a good thing. But anything the government touches, turns to crap eventually. But that's the future. So I'm very bullish on energy, but that's a longer term play. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and right now, getting involved in a lot of those stocks that really focus on renewable energy, they're not paying a big yield right now because they're reinvesting everything internally. Right. Some of the traditional oil companies can pay a decent dividend, but then you have to worry about, is that dividend going to get cut if the demand for oil stays down, if the prices stay down? So again, it's a time where investing for income is a challenge. And again, that's why today we're talking about investing by contract, having a contract like that lease with creditworthy tenants. So in the final minute we have left here today, as you know, our listeners are pretty much all over the age of 50 or 55. They're part of the income generation. What's your best advice for them?
Be careful. I don't. I've been a gold and silver. I was buying silver at 1964 when I was 16. I started buying gold at 72 when I was 20 something, when it was illegal for Americans to own gold. So I never saved dollars. I just saved gold and silver. And now I'm buying Bitcoin. But that's a hedge. I'm talking about, it's not income, it's a hedge. And so, but if it crashes, I'm okay, because gold and silver and Bitcoin somehow hold their value.
So best advice is, at bare minimum, have a hedge against stock prices coming down, be diversified that way, and then do the best to generate the income that you can.
It's a hedge against the dollar. It's a hedge against the dollar.
Yeah,
that's gold and Bitcoin.
That's true too. So listen, we need to leave it there for now. Thanks so much for being back with us on the show. We really appreciate it. Hope to talk with you soon. And you stay with us too. We have more coming up in just a moment right here on the Income Generation. We'll be right back.
Thank you, David.
I'm David Scranton. As we reopen the economy, a renaissance has begun in the world of investing. If you or your advisor are not prepared for the new corona economy, you could be left behind. You don't have to cross your fingers and toes hoping for growth in this unpredictable stock market. There is a more conservative way, and that is to invest for income without all the stock market risk.
Call the Retirement Income Store today at 866-853-7209 for your free retirement income kit. Call 866-853-7209 now.
For behind-the-scenes photos, retirement planning tips, and upcoming giveaways, follow the Income Generation Show on Facebook. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch video clips, guest interviews, and to catch up on past episodes.
Now, obviously, not all contractual investments are the same. They have varying stipulations and varying degrees of risk. However, in the universe of income-based financial strategies, all are designed to generate income at a fixed rate regardless of market conditions. For example, when you purchase an individual bond, your contract is with the business or the agency issuing the bond. While your bond's value may fluctuate on paper due to changes in the market, it has a par value or a face value that doesn't change thanks to your contract. As I explained earlier, the return of that par value, if you hold the bond to maturity, is part of your contractual agreement, along with interest paid at a guaranteed dollar amount for the life of the bond. Again, of course, providing there's no defaults. By contrast, common stocks have essentially no par value. So when you invest in them, you're literally speculating on supply and demand. With no contract, any loss in value while you own the stock is a real loss. And your income isn't guaranteed either because dividends can change. As for other contract-based options, if you watched our recent show all about annuities, an annuity is a contract between you and an insurance company that allows you to contribute money to a tax-deferred account. And in return, you can get regular payments as income, or you can withdraw funds later starting on a certain date. This depends on whether your annuity is immediate or deferred. Beyond annuities, there are even more options. Preferred stocks, for example, are contract-based investments. Although a preferred stock is a stock, it pays a fixed dividend and also has a par value. Then there are tools such as business development companies or BDCs and real estate investment trusts or REITs. Now, while these investments in and of themselves do not have a par value like bonds or preferreds, their underlying assets are pooled, and those underlying assets oftentimes have a par value. In that sense, they're similar to a bond fund. But typically, the interest or dividends being generated by these investments is much higher. And right now, it's time to welcome my good friend and co-host, Jeff Small, president of Arbor Financial Services, a retirement income store located in Melbourne, Florida. He's also our very own brand ambassador for the Retirement Income Store and Amazon best-selling author of the book, Turning Financial Planning Right Side Up. So, Jeff, I know you were at least able to hear my interview with Robert Kiyosaki, of course. And, what do you make of that? I mean, gosh, I tried maybe 3 different times to talk. As I said to him, here's the guy who wrote the book Cash Flow Quadrant, right? He has a game where he teaches young children how to invest for cash flow. Yet even he seemed to be at a bit of a loss today on how to really invest for cash flow, invest for income.
Yeah, Dave, and we're kind of in a conundrum based on his philosophical principles of cash flow because renters are not paying their rent. People are squatting on the properties in real estate that, if you're an individual landlord and you've got properties, you might be going through that. You may not be going through that. But the message is when you have different underlying economic conditions, even that strategy can be impacted. And so as investors today, as consumers, investors, what we want to do for our listeners and our viewers is to get into the areas of investing where we don't have to worry about interruptions in cash flow. And you know where I'm going with this, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Everything can have interruptions. For example, we talked a little bit about real estate and, with him and with Robert and real estate investment trusts as an investment. And as he alluded to, even in our own, we have a real estate investment trust as an option in our portfolios for the right investor. But we're always looking, saying, okay, do we want to? He mentioned shopping malls, right? Do we really feel comfortable shopping malls are going to come back? And that's why, even though real estate investment trusts are just a small little part of the holdings, that any of our clients might have, we've super diversified it because we're in a different world today. And I know you're chomping at the bit to talk about investing by contract, which is where you're going. But even in common stocks, right? A lot of advisors today, if they're trying to generate income, are going to be in high dividend paying common stocks. But as we saw back in March, or I should say, as we were reminded of back in March, even a lot of those companies, those big, stable, blue chippy companies we thought we could rely on, they cut their dividends. Some of them totally stopped their dividends, right?
They have, and I think that dividend restructuring that we've seen in every economic meltdown since 2000 to 2008 till this year, that dividend meltdown is going to continue as companies are looking for ways to improve their bottom line and minimize their expenses. And dividends are you're losing part of your cash flow when you pay those out as a company. And so we're going to see that continue. So you should not be looking for income through the market. That's not the way to create income. If you can afford to live on your regular income and not pull your investment income and reinvest your dividends, that might be okay to weather the storm. But stocks can be really harsh, Dave. We've lived through all of these tragedies in the market.
Yeah, and even though we do a better job than most with dividend-paying common stocks, one of our portfolios is yielding almost a 5% dividend right now. At the end of the day, you're right. That's great for once you've covered your basic needs. So if you have the I need, and then you go to the I want, for your I want needs, common stock could be a fine way to go because if dividends get cut, okay, maybe you get just a little bit less of the I want. But for the I have income needs, that's where the investing for contract, at least the way I tell people, is really most crucial because now, literally companies would have to go bankrupt for them to be able to stop paying that income. So it gives people much more level of certainty that their needs are going to be covered throughout retirement.
It does. There's no doubt. And so specifically, though, Dave, I think what you mean by investing by contract is like buying a corporate bond. You buy a corporate bond, you buy it for a certain term, similar to a CD. You've got a maturity. It could be 4 years, could be 5 years, 10 years longer, whatever. It pays a fixed rate of interest over that time frame, and then you get your money back on that bond at maturity. And so generally, those are much more stable ways to create income and a much more stable way to preserve your asset from risk as long as those companies don't go under, so to speak. So we're really betting on solvency in that sense, right, Dave?
That's right. And in fact, what that does is remove the guesswork. A lot of people will say, and you probably hear this too, they'll say, well, let's see your track record. And when somebody says, let's see your investment track record, what they're really saying is, I'm used to a stock market-based situation where I've got to rely on my advisor's crystal ball to determine how my investments are going to do. But when you invest by contract, the crystal ball element goes to the wayside because essentially what you and I are doing is analytics much like a banker would do when a banker is trying to approve a mortgage. As long as this person doesn't go bankrupt, they could pay the mortgage, we've got it made.
That's right. And so we only want to buy companies that we know are going to be in business that can afford to pay back the value of that bond when it matures. That's really, really important. That's a much purer way and a better way for investors to harvest income than it is to buy a bond mutual fund where you're really owning stock in a company that owns a bunch of bonds.
Yeah, absolutely. And if if you're going to do that and get 3%, maybe 4% if you're lucky, heck, then you can go ahead and essentially buy a BDC and have the same type of thing, but yet get a much higher yield, maybe get a yield in the 6 to 10% range. So there's not a lot of redeeming factors, I think, today in bond funds. So we need to close it up because we've got another guest coming on the show. So, 20 seconds. Since you weren't able to be here with me on the interview, tell me what do you want our viewers and listeners to know about this topic?
Well, I think the most important thing is they get forward momentum on their money without being codependent on the market. That means they're earning interest at all times, no matter what happens. And some section of your portfolio, and it's different for everybody, needs to be allocated in that sense.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And bond funds aren't the answer. So great. We can take a quick commercial break. We'll be back in a minute. And you stay with us. We have much more coming up in just a moment here on The Income Generation. I'm Dave Scranton, and we'll be right back. I'm David Scranton. When it came time for my mom to retire, one simple mistake forced her to work years longer than she should have. And that's why I started the Retirement Income Store, to help hardworking Americans 55 and over plan for the retirement they deserve. I couldn't help my mom, but maybe I can help you.
Call 866-314-7227 to receive your free retirement income kit with 5 educational tools and a no-obligation conversation with an income specialist. Call 866-314-7227. Online at theretirementincomestore.com.
In my experience, the more conservative and moderate options on the left and on the middle of this chart are the most appropriate for investors in or nearing retirement. Why? Because they're all contract-based to some degree. For many Americans in or nearing retirement, shifting to a completely conservative to moderate portfolio of income-based strategies might just be the right call. It gives them reliable income and satisfies their desire to greatly reduce their level of investment risk. However, as I always say, every investor and every situation is different. Some people might prefer to carry a bit more risk and stay in the aggressive stock market game even after they've shifted their strategic focus to income. And that can be done also, but the key word is strategic. For example, if you want to take some risk and you want to be in common stocks, in spite of the absence of a contract, a skillfully managed portfolio of high dividend yielding common stocks can be a much more effective way to go about it after age 50 than continuing to invest for capital gains. The key lies in having that management through an advisor who specializes in income generating strategies. Now let's bring back in Jeff as well as our next guest. I believe a first timer here on the Income Generation, our good friend Jim Lineweaver, founder and CEO of Lineweaver Financial Group in Northeastern Ohio, and also the author of a new book coming out October 20th. It's called Your Retirement Playbook, Ohio's Guide to a Successful Retirement. Jim, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Great to see you.
So first of all, I've got to applaud you because you've done really a niche book that includes America's heroes, or at least Ohio's heroes, our first responders, which I think is a group that sometimes gets overlooked when it comes to advice. So what motivated you personally to write this book?
Well, back in the latter part of the 80s, I actually was a police officer as I was putting myself through school and getting a finance degree. And so I was paying into the same pension plans and the same deferred compensation plans. And then I continued my education on at the Weatherhead School of Business and got into financial advising. But through the years, we just kept running into people that just kept making the wrong decisions with their pensions, liquidity issues to, supplement their retirement, how to make sure they minimize their taxes, maximize their benefits. There's a lot of, talking that goes around on these departments. And sometimes that communication is more opinions than anything else and not facts-based. And a lot of times we just saw the mistakes over and over again that really can derail a successful retirement. So the reason for the book was to look at all the 5 state pension plans in the state of Ohio. They all have different nuances and moving parts, and it's really tough to put your hands or get your arms all the way around that so that you can make a good decision on all your financial, tax, legal, and insurance needs, and that's exactly what this book does.
Yeah, I find all too often people take that lunchroom advice that you were referring to before from a coworker, and occasionally it can be very good, but more often than not, it's not. It falls short of the mark. Jeff?
Jim, you are one of the most successful financial advisors that I have ever known. and I've been doing this a long time, almost 35 years now. Even though your book is more geared towards your career-centric experiences in Ohio, I'm really looking forward to reviewing it because I know that those experiences are really going to transcend every state in the country, even though each state has its own different nuances. And so I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in the pension area of our country between companies and states and municipalities. And so why don't you tell us, what should people be concerned today about a massive pension failure? Because we know pensions across the board, specifically in a lot of the states like Illinois and several other states, they don't have the funds to keep their pension going. So, what's going to happen with pensions if they become, let's say, they default?
Well, there's a lot of different ways that they're trying to head off that eventual problem, right? Because, the private sector, the majority of them got rid of pensions a long time ago and then brought in the 401ks. And even on the nonprofit side, went to 403Bs and these 457s. So what you're seeing over time is that the pensions are trying to head off some of this major problem. They see it, they get all the actuarial studies. As a matter of fact, back in May of 2017, the Hoover Institute did a study with pensions all across the country. And they looked at and found that there were 649 state pensions that were basically underfunded. And what was being reported actually as that liability turned out to be a lot lower than their estimates. Matter of fact, they should be as high as trillion dollars. And that's actually 2.8 times larger than what was actually being recorded. And also, from the state pension side, when you're looking at the amount of revenue as a percentage of pension that they're contributing on their employees' behalf, on average, it's around 5%. And their study found that they actually, if they want to make sure and bring everything back up to par, you're going to have to get closer to a 13% of revenue contributions for the employees. So there's
Jim, is a huge amount right now in this COVID world when states are really, they're concerned about their own revenues. So we can take a quick commercial break. We'll be back in a minute. You stay with us. We have much more to come right here on The Income Generation. Welcome back. I'm here with my good friend and co-host, Jeff Small, and also a new friend to The Income Generation, Jim Lineweaver. So Jim, you're saying that it would be 13% of budget, not 5% of budget, to get these states and municipalities caught up as a general rule. But at least the good news is that, at least in theory, states themselves can't really go bankrupt. So they've got to find a way to fund this. They could change the benefits moving forward, but they've got to fund at least a deficit up to this point, which is more than we could say. I mean, you heard Robert Kiyosaki's concerns about the average pension in corporate America, right? A lot better than we could say about corporate America, correct?
Correct. Yes, there is a certain safety net there. And that's actually why people work for municipalities and police and fire and school systems and teachers. I mean, they want to rely on that pension down the road. So it's not all gloom and doom, but you have to be proactive so that you don't jump into retirement like a lot of people have done in the past. And all of a sudden, you're paying $500 or $800 a month for healthcare that you didn't plan on, or a lot of other things that are creeping up that can blindside you into retirement. So it's more important than ever before to really be proactive when it comes to these pensions and put yourself in the driver's seat as opposed to just the rearview mirror.
And that's where things like the deferred comp plans come in, the 457 plans. And for you viewers who are listeners who are, maybe you don't have a 457 plan, maybe you have a 401k plan, maybe you have a 403b plan. It's really all the same. And all those plans are basically limited to mutual funds for the most part. So what do you tell people, Jim, when you're trying to get them to take matters in their own hands? Maybe they've got several years to go to retirement. Benefits could get frozen at some point. So you're encouraging them to take matters in their own hands. I know you are. What are you telling them?
Well, always pay yourself first, just like anybody else. Make sure you're trying to max out those pre-tax contributions to a 403b, 457, things along that nature. What we also want to do, which is so critical for people with pensions, because if you're married, you're going to choose some type of survivorship option. And a lot of times, if you take a life-only option on the pension, you'll get a lot more money, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars over the next 20, 30 years. But how do you then take care of your spouse? So we lock in their insurability with term insurance, maybe a 20-year period of time. And then when we go to do their retirement planning, if they have a health condition or something that popped up, they can look at converting that to something permanent, locking in a higher pension payout so they have more to live on in retirement. But there's a lot of other things to consider as well, like Social Security and income generating investments as well.
Sure. And that's what I love about pensions is you're talking about investing by contract on the show, and essentially that's what a pension is, right, Jeff?
Yeah, it really is. You're investing by contract there. And so speaking of investing by contract, that sounds kind of similar, Dave, to some of the other things we discuss all the time. But when we look at the underfunded pensions, and I want to come back to this for a second, Jim, it's in the trillions of dollars. We know these pension funds have to invest in common stocks to derive a very high rate of return because they've got to be able to meet their needs for their payouts and their future expectations. But as far as the other remaining retirement assets in your book that you talk about, like the 457s that Dave just mentioned, I'm sure that you're taking a conservative approach with those dollars in retirement. So tell us about what's the correct approach for the teacher, the fireman, the policeman, the people that have those types of 457 plans with their intangible holdings. What should their philosophy be in today's market?
Well, today you got a lot of volatility coming up. You got the elections, headwind from China. I mean, you got high unemployment. The PPP covenants are now gone, so that these companies can now lay off if they did receive the PPP. So a lot of uncertainty, and obviously the market doesn't like uncertainty, and that's going to get added volatility. So look at income producing things, try to get a little more conservative, especially if retirement's around the corner. You can look at individual bonds, you can look at preferred stocks, you can look at other things that can provide income producing things, and that'd be outside of your 457. Inside, if we have to stay to mutual funds and things along that nature, we're going to go to the short duration on the yield curve, maybe intermediate term to short term bonds for the time being, and then try to find other things that are good dividend producing holdings. Because at least in the state of Ohio, they only offer about 23, 25 holdings. Our 457 plan provides over 400 offerings, or a lot of different options. Sometimes some of them offer up to even 1,000 or 2,000. So we can really customize a portfolio to match their risk tolerance and goals and objectives to get them ready for retirement.
Jim, 30 seconds. How about fixed interest funds? It wasn't too long ago, people had a 3% or maybe even a 4% fixed interest fund as an option in some of those deferred comp plans. Do you see any 3%ers anymore?
We can, believe it or not, because they've gotten the ETF side, even though it can't be inside there. The mutual funds are going after more indexes, so we can still get maybe, and it's not easy, but it's hard, but get in that maybe 3.5% range, but you're not getting much over 3.5% these days.
But just not a fixed guaranteed account, you're saying?
No, you're not. Those are
ETFs,
lower.
Income from that. Gotcha. Again, Jim Lineweaver, your retirement play handbook. I think it's a great buy, even if you are a public servant in another state. Go out and get the book on Amazon. Jim, thanks so much for being with us today. Really appreciate you having here, as usual.
Thanks. Appreciate the opportunity.
And you stay with us. We'll be back here in a moment on The Income Generation. We'll be right back. I'd like to thank our guests, Robert Kiyosaki and Jim Lineweaver, as well, of course, as my good friend and co-host, Jeff Small, for joining me today here on The Income Generation. I'd also like to thank you, our new and returning viewers. As everyone knows, no investment or financial strategy is 100% risk-free. However, for investors in or nearing retirement looking to decrease their risk and looking to generate reliable income that they can't outlive, understanding the benefits of investing by contract is absolutely crucial. So let's recap some of the most important points from today's show. First, the most important difference between individual bonds and bond mutual funds is that the former is a contract-based investment and the latter is not. Bond mutual funds lack the two important contractual guarantees you get with individual bonds, of course, and they also carry all the potential risks of a stock mutual fund. Ultimately, bond funds take an investment tool that normally does have a contract to help you protect against loss and to guarantee your income, assuming, of course, no defaults, but packages it in such a way that eliminates the contract. Second, most advisors with traditional growth-based business models offer only bond mutual funds. Why? Because they're more convenient and potentially more lucrative for them than individual bonds are. Most growth-based advisors also lack the resources and they lack the knowledge to actively manage a portfolio of individual bonds and bond-like instruments. And finally, not all contractual investments are the same. They come with different stipulations and they carry different types of risk, depending on whether they're truly conservative or whether they're moderate. In the universe of income-based financial strategies, all are designed to generate the income you need to help achieve your retirement goals at a fixed rate of interest or fixed dividend rate, regardless of market conditions. As always, stay safe and thanks for watching. If you're close to or in retirement and you're concerned about your money, it's essential you stay informed and up to date. And as you know, right here is where you can do it on The Income Generation. I'm David Scranton, and we'll see you next week.
Diane and her husband dreamed of spending their retirement traveling, but that changed when she became her mother's primary caregiver. Now her day starts before 6 a.m., helping mom often late into the night. It's a stressful job, but Diane wants the best for her mom. Sound familiar? We thought so too. Caregiving can take a toll on your family, but the Retirement Income Store is here to help. Call 1-888-888-4176 to find out how the Retirement Income Store can help you achieve financial empowerment during retirement.